The first thing to mention is there's this old trope that great companies are bought, not sold, which means that if you've built something of value, people will notice. And if your ultimate destination is an acquisition, then that will end up happening if you wanted to because people will come knocking on your door. Okay. As opposed to necessarily building something explicitly to get sold. Now, I found founders in different markets end up building something with the goal of getting sold all the time. And indeed, 80% of the exits, even in our crazy SPAC IPO world we're in right now, are M&A. So it's the most likely way to do it. But as you said, certainly Mayfield and I think great founders in general try to build companies that are sustaining, durable, category defining businesses that can ultimately be standalone public companies. So what do you do if you're a founder? Well, there's a whole funnel, upfront funnel part of the process, if you will, and then there's the execution. On the upfront part of the process, I will say that something like, I don't know, 14 out of the 15 M&A deals I did at Twitter were for relationships that were in place with people at the company for at least a year, if not more, sometimes for decades. So there's a really strong relationship component to being acquired. And so what I always tell founders is if you're in an ecosystem that has big, well-funded competitors, people that you think may be useful to talk to as potential acquirers, then it's a good idea to start building those relationships far ahead of time. Don't wait until, oh, our Series A process didn't work out and we want to sell, or we have to decide if we want to go long or sell the company because we're at the cusp of a next round of financing, any one of those milestones. Think about it ahead of time. And an easy way to do that is, one, you can align your biz dev relationships if you need biz dev relationships with corp dev relationships because they're often one and the same. So when you're meeting with people from a biz dev standpoint, be thinking about presenting yourself in a way that makes you interesting and attractive as a leader to the acquirer. Another way to do it is to think, hey, how do I make sure that every couple of months, every quarter, I'm just spending a little bit of time with at least one acquirer. That way you're starting to sow the seeds of a relationship that can potentially be harvested in the future. One of the comments and questions I get a lot from founders is like, well, how much should I talk about my business? How much should I give away in these conversations? And my rough heuristic on that is you're there to actually listen more than you are to speak. And that's where it can be really valuable for you. So come in with your standard pitch and then ask questions. And by asking questions, you'll be able to understand how the buyer potentially thinks about your business, and you'll be able to tailor and understand how their language intersects with your language so that you can speak from the same vocabulary, such that if downstream it turns out to have an acquisition, it doesn't feel like there's a big cultural mismatch because you're always talking the same language already. So there's some interesting sort of elements of that that I think are important. On the actual acquisition front, there's a long list of things to do, but a couple of the basic bits of feedback I give to founders are, one, get great advisors. Most founders, even if they've sold a company before, need good advice and have a great lawyer. Sometimes a banker makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. Venture investors who've been through the ringer a few times are usually really good folks to kind of get advice from. So really lean on your advisors, get great advisors in the process. And then, there's signals of interest as you're going through an M&A process. Be looking for clarity of strategy, be looking for escalating meetings, and be looking for increased pace, because those things together will give you a sense that the buyer is actually really interested in what you're doing. And then you can trust that there's actually, real insight there. And you can use that to start to get other buyers to the table, which is always the greatest leverage in any M&A process as a seller. Keeping in mind, obviously, that there's always a lot of ups and downs and all arounds before the end. So the other thing to always remember as a founder who's thinking about selling a company is the deal's not done until it's done. So make sure you run all the way to the tape, because certainly there's many unfortunate stories of founders who, because of one change or another, have been left at the altar at the end of the process and maybe don't have the capital to keep going because they haven't been accounting for that reality.